Hello everyone, I'm Lydia Ruth. Welcome to Homemaking Radio. I'm speaking from the sewing room in the manse, and before you get started listening to the rest of this, if you're listening to it on YouTube, please click the link in the description box where it will take you to the page on which I have it embedded and there won't be any ads to have to click off. And so please try to do that, because you can also leave comments there on that blog, and you can look at the other pictures and maybe some links I've mentioned, or names of books and things around the manse that might interest you. And my purpose is, let's just put away that old world today, and let's just do some thinking about calmness and stability and peace in the home. And let's turn our home into a place of refuge by not bringing in all the bad news, all the reports. It's been there forever. You even look at the times of Jesus and all the reports that were sent out, the scary reports that went out about him and around him, and things that weren't true, to get everyone upset. And also, I will tell you that it's better to keep yourself composed by having a routine in the morning. I never understood that when I was growing up. Life was busy and it was interesting, and I never thought about those little ceremonies like getting up in the morning and washing yourself and dressing carefully and arranging your hair. Everything was so, it seemed like, unnecessary if you had a bigger goal in mind. But the personal preparation today is so important to fight the onslaught of distress and stress and anxiety that's going on, that has finally permeated the lives of homemakers. It used to be you could get in a home, your home was kind of impervious to it. And I found something in Romans chapter 12 that a lot of people like to read, because it gives you if you didn't have any more scriptures than Romans 12, apparently this has been said to be what you need to live your life, to get along in life. And it's talking about being careful of yourself and your character and your personality. And I ran across this, and I've read this many times. Do not be slothful in zeal, be fervent in spirit, serve the Lord, rejoice in hope, be patient in tribulation, be constant in prayer. Now, look, would that little formula work well to give you a shield from anxiety? Rejoice in hope, be patient in tribulation. Now, tribulation is trials and distress and things that come upon you, and roadblocks that people put in front of you for accomplishing your goal. If you're patient in that, and what do? We've lost our patience. We have meltdowns. We give up. And there are many people that would have done well. Some of the poetry I read to you from Edgar A. Guest said often people could have won had they just stuck to it. They were on the right path. They were only a few minutes away from accomplishing the goal. So be patient in tribulation, be constant in prayer. Constantly pray. You know, remember Hannah? She was praying and she was just mouthing the words, and she looked like she was deranged. It was said in the scriptures, talking about Hannah, who was the mother of Samuel eventually, that she looked like she was mad, as in crazy, because she was praying. And so it says, be constant in prayer. Contribute to the needs of the saints and seek to show hospitality. Now, we could discuss all those things. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse them. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Never be wise in your own sight. Repay no one evil for evil, but give thought to do what is honorable in the sight of all. If possible, as far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay. And so we see many times that there will be, if you're a homemaker, and your life is not as placid as you want it to be, Part of it is something that the forces against you are not really telling you, not really admitting, and that is they don't want you to succeed. And so today we're going to talk about some things that you can do to get ready for the day and at least succeed today in something. Maybe you will just succeed in getting ready, and that's good enough. So I start out with 5 things, and you can have your own list here. This is just based on my observations and my own experiments and experience. And so it's just me talking, and it's for you to listen while you work. I don't have much to show you here. I might show you the name of a book or two. And so you start out with, I like to start out with a cup of my favorite beverage and making a list. And sometimes barely awake, but I like to sit in the sunrise. And because I've learned the value of it, it kind of resets. Going barefoot and experiencing the sunrise, especially just because before it comes over the crest of the earth, apparently resets your mind and body in some way. And I have to tell you, I didn't believe it, but I kept doing it, and I have to say, I feel more whole and balanced from it. I don't feel so crazy. And a lot of the things in our houses have chemicals in them, and we don't know what we're suffering from. But if you could get outside, if you could have your hot drink in the morning in the sunrise, or open a window, or stand by an open window. Remember Jane Austen. I'm quite fond of standing by an open window. And if you could make your list. Make your list of the most important things that need to be done today. I'm sure you've got an archive full of stuff that need to be done, but the basic things that need to be done. And then have a prayer and ask God to bless you and to help you accomplish what is the most important. Then if you'll do a few exercises and a walk, all this could be done out in the sunrise if you're able to do that. And also, if you could write a few words in a gratefulness journal, or read a few words from a good book, the scriptures, even a dictionary, and increase your understanding. Or if you could sing something, or any other little thing that is a rebuilding or a building up. Remember, I told you that the word edify means to build up and to improve the mind. And so I will call it rebuilding. A lot of people call this self-care. When you have to go lay down, take a little rest, read a good book, watch a good movie, they call that self-care. But I call it building up or edifying. So today we're going to talk about a number of things, and your house is so we'll go on to your appearance. Make sure your clothes are fresh. Sometimes we have clean clothes. They're hanging in the closet, folded up in a drawer, or stored somewhere, and they can be perfectly clean, but you get them out and they've developed a musty smell. So make sure your clothes, this is what Fly Lady says, do lay out your clothes for the next day. That way you can check them out and make sure that they're going to be fresh and smell good, and that you will be happy wearing them. And wear things that make you happy and inspire you. And remember, if you have little children around and you're the mother, they're going to be familiar with your clothes. They're going to hang on to your apron. They're going to hang on to your skirt. And this is good. And they're going to enjoy, they might even lay their head on your lap and fall asleep, enjoy looking at the little print you have. I had a dress one time that had little tiny panda bears printed all over. I've never seen a print like that since. And my youngest said he loved that dress, especially in church, because he would lay his head down on it when he was real little. He told me how much he liked that. And so the people in your home are greatly affected by what you look like, how you take care of yourself, how you fix yourself up. And you are too. It will help you with your composure in the home. Now, home is not just a place where we're all just going to lay around and let down say stupid things because, after all, it's not formal or anything like that. But it is the place where we're going to develop some composure and some manners. It's a place where it can be controlled by the mother and the wife and the homemaker and everyone that lives there. And so the house, that's why I go into the house next after your appearance. Those of you who like to wear a little scent, you can make a natural scent with, when we were growing up on the homestead, my mother was just famous for this. She could make rose perfume from the rose petals, the wild roses that grew outside. She could make orange perfume from the orange peels. She had a way of doing this. And you can make your own fresh scent if you want to make a spray or some kind of natural perfume. These things that lift up the senses are good for you, good for the home. Now the house is more, when it's more orderly, you'll find that the temperaments are better, and so are you. When you're dressed up, let me tell you a little bit more about your appearance. It is a way of being dignified, and it's a way of having composure. And I think especially if you're homeschooling, you need to be careful not to buy into the cultural attitude of sloppiness and I don't care-ness, like, oh, let's just grab that old t-shirt, let's just pull those old pants on, and let's just, we don't care as long as we're dressed. Because even in the olden days, when we're growing up on homesteads, farms, wilderness and stuff, we cared about our clothing. We cared because it was part of being mannerly. It was part of having good manners. It's part of being courteous of other people. How do you feel if someone who's in your home or related to you or a friend comes by and they act like they don't care and they haven't had a shower in a long time and they're not really good with their grooming? It's depressing, isn't it? So it's part of good manners. It's part of getting a composure. And I would encourage you to make sure that you pray. If you're waking up in the morning feeling thoughts whirling about you and you just feel disjointed and everything, to start dedicating all that to prayer and asking God to settle your mind down. One thing that it will help is before you retire at night, if you will clean up your kitchen or kitchen and living room, at least clean up something so when you get up in the morning you don't feel as confused. This can be difficult because we get tired, But if you start at, let's say, 4 o'clock to wind everything down, I have a friend that calls it closing shop. You start at 4 o'clock to wind everything down and get it all cleaned up, you won't have as much the next day to deal with. And I'm not here to tell you how to do your housework. Things work differently in everybody's home. You can go online and find things, find ways. You can even get, I believe, you can subscribe to homemakers coaches and people that will help you get your act together at home. But just taking care of yourself is a big job, isn't it? And so you need to teach your children the good manners of taking care of themselves because it takes stress off of other people. And they're not as tempted to mistreat you and your children if you dress well. Your boys, if you're going to be in public or anyone's coming to the door, your boys need to be freshly bathed and dressed with button-down shirts and clothing that looks put together and all closed up, and shoes tied if you tie your shoes anymore. And you have to have an attitude about your dress and your physical appearance because it affects your mind and it affects the way you learn. And if you're homeschooling especially, you need to make sure your family is different. The world will not like it. Your friends and relatives will not like it. They will say that your children won't fit in. That's good. If they don't fit in, then they are spared a lot of things because they won't be participating in things that are probably very bad for them. So don't worry about not fitting in. If you're a homemaker, even if you're not homeschooling, you won't fit in. But that's okay because you're spared all the baggage of people who may hang on to you and have problems and also be a bad influence. One thing you have to be careful with as a homemaker This is why I say you're safer if you do your housework. If you'll get those wet areas cleaned up in your house, the laundry, the bathroom, the kitchen, get that all, you're safer at home, because people think that you are lonely or needy, or that you face the problem of not fitting in and you don't feel like you're welcome or anything like that. They will prey upon you and want you to do things with them, because some of the things people do, they just feel more comfortable. They've got somebody else to influence or somebody else with them, and you're really safer at home making your own decisions. And so you're really better off at home, because you don't have other people imposing on you, bossing you around. And a couple of the things that affect homemakers that you might want to be aware of, especially if you're a new homemaker. If you are in a church, if you are a Christian, if you claim to be religious, they even churches will tell you this, and that is that we should care about other people, and we should be benevolent and hospitable to other people, and worry about everybody else's welfare, because that's the Christian's duty. That can be very tempting and distracting, because you start to think, oh my goodness, my kids and I are living in this lovely house with 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. We have a little money in the bank, and we get to go to the store whenever we want to, and there's all these unfortunate people around. We should do something. And so it's really tempting to be distracted and to get involved in something. But right now, your children and your family are the most important. And then the other thing that's real intimidating is you hear this when maybe from the time you're first married till forever, that we live in a country that's in the top 10 percentile of wealth in the world. So therefore, we should be sharing. Should open your home to people. Let people come and live with you. Let people, you should care for others. If you have children at home, if you're married, don't have anyone in your home. Even if you're not married, it's better to be alone. There's many dangers to that. And of course, the most important is influence and having your mind and your activities distracted. And so when I first began homeschooling, I was warned about this, but I didn't become a homeschooler till later, after I'd been married a while, and I noticed that we thought, oh yes, we'll take this person in and we'll take that person in, and it's never good. It makes you so that you're more self-conscious, and you can't really express yourself. Home should be a place where you can have ideas that you share with each other and talk about and not be judged. And you cannot have that if you have other people in your home. I was watching a Zoom court case, which I quite like. I like it on Zoom. And it was about a man that had been driven out of his own home because he had been kind to a couple of strangers. And he had to leave because it became so unrestful and intolerable to him. And of course, I was talking to my young grandson about this, who's in his 20s, and he reads a lot of the old books. He reads Dickens, he reads Austen, he reads all these things that I've been reading to you off and on. He says one of the problems is that we've quit reading these old stories. And even watching, you can get the movies of Dickens' Our Mutual Friend and Chuzzlewit and some of these things, and notice these characters have always existed. The person that would latch on to you and live off of your income, or just kind of impose himself in your life. And he says the problem is we're unaware. We're caught off guard because we have not, our generation and their generation hasn't immersed themselves in these old stories, but they're all there. They're all in there. And of course, even the scriptures have accounts of people who fit in, who followed the crowd, young people who went along with the advice of other young people instead of the elderly, the wise elderly, I must say. Just because you're elderly doesn't mean you're wise. You could be just an old fool. And so I wanted to talk about that a little bit, because your home has to be free of other people if you're going to succeed. And I don't mean for you to be mean to your immediate family. Yes, my descendants are always welcome here, but and my anyone else that's related to us, directly related to us, it would be different, but it's not the same with other people. And so you've all had experience with it, and will have to be cautious. I even caution my older grandchildren, you're going to get a home of your own someday. Make sure that you're careful not to be someone who could be easily walked over and take advantage of. So I also want to talk to you about having a heart for your home. If you could get it the way you like it, just do a walkthrough in your house. And you know, the Bible says, don't be weary in well-doing. If you can get your house the way that you like it, it won't weary you so much. Sometimes I will think, oh, the kitchen's clean, but I'll look at it, around at it critically and think, would this work better to put this over here than this over here? And would this work better to hide this? If anything starts to aggravate me or to feel inferior in there, I'll just change it a little bit. And so if you can get your house the way you want it, get it pleasant, make it feel like the most luxurious inn you have ever been to see, and make it the way you like it, that makes you happy. And don't save luxury, the way you see things, the way you hear things, the way you see taste things. Don't save that for a vacation and go and to some other inn. Make your house your own inn. And that's just my own, based on my own observations, where we can be the happiest. And if you let too much stress come into your home, too much worry, you know, that little old phone, even if all it is a phone where you're contacting your loved ones, they figure out how to get the bad news to you. Someone does, or something will come up. And if you can keep that out of your life and be happy, some of these little things that we experience become great. And instead of being worried about what the rest of the world is doing, be concerned about what you're doing and leave some kind of a legacy or a diary or a journal about it, about your observations. I'm going to talk about the word noble and nobility. So if you want to keep working while you listen, that's nice. And so I was reading the one that I quote often, Philippians 4:8, whatever's good, whatever's noble, think on these things, and God knows that our mind will control our lives. He says, think on these things. So I thought I would define the word noble for you. And of course, it could be one of two things, just like there was another word that kind of went with it. I'm trying to think what it was. Dignity. Dignity and nobility could each of them have two meanings. Dignity meaning a dignity, someone who was important because of his birth or because of his election or because of his job, a dignity, and a kind of authority politically. And the other was a noble, which is the same thing, someone either by birth or by job or by ownership of something becomes a noble. So now, but yet, I'm going to show you, especially for you homeschoolers, how nearly every word we have has a spiritual side to it, has a meaning to it. And so I'm going to read to you about nobility, because being a homemaker is a noble thing. And your children learning to have manners, and we're going to combine manners with this, because learning manners is a act of nobility. It's a noble thing. So the description is a character description. And it doesn't mean you're born in a class, but it gives you class. Isn't that interesting? And you can be noble in manners conduct, conversation. It means you rise above the petty, and you're in an improvement mode. You're in an optimistic mode. It is a wonderful word. I'm now going to read it to you out of this big old dictionary. Oh my goodness, this thing is so heavy. You can get this online though, and you can type it's Webster's 1828 dictionary. And I believe that those of you who are British could probably get Samuel Johnson's online dictionary too. They're books that were written in the 17 and 1800s, and so I wanted to read this to you because this man went to a lot of trouble to put the origin of words, like was it a Greek word, was it a French word, whatever. And so I wanted to read the spiritual side of the word noble and nobility, nobleness. So it's the dignity of mind. Now this comes, I'm referring to Philippians 4:8, whatever's good, whatever's true, whatever's lovely, whatever's noble, truthful, etc. Dignity of mind. Nobility this is the spiritual side. Dignity of mind. So dignity, it's a noble thing for you to get dressed in the morning and to look your best and be happy. It's a noble thing. It's an act of nobility for your boys to, I'm doing boys today because I'm doing several manners books that I've found for boys. There's never a lack of things for girls, it seems like, but it's hard to find good books, in my opinion, for boys. Not always, but nobility, dignity of mind, greatness, grandeur, that elevation of soul which comprehends bravery, generosity, magnanimity, and contempt of everything that dishonors character. And then, of course, the other side is the antiquity of a family, a descent from a noble ancestor. We're not talking about that. But it's not about coming from a class. It's about having class. So, here's more about it. A noble, which means elevated, dignified, being above everything petty that can dishonor reputation, such as a noble mind, a noble courage, noble deeds of valor. Exalted, elevated, sublime, magnificent, stately, splendid, distinguished. And so we're talking about the not the noble person by birth, but just noble because of the acquirement of good character. Now, I didn't find the root word of it, but so let's go on. Nobleness, greatness, dignity. His purposes are full of honesty, nobleness, and integrity. Greatness of mind and nobleness. So here's some more here. Greatness of soul, heroically, as a deed nobly done. He nobly preferred death to disgrace. Splendidly and magnificently, he was nobly entertained. And so you might want to start a little journal for your child and write a word like that in fancy letters, have them color the letters, write it down and put it in a sentence. And I'm going to try to connect it today to the nobleness of homemaking and home living. Now, many of you are doing better than I am, so don't look at me as someone to follow or my ways to follow, because I'm just giving you some ideas so that you can go off on your own and be autodidactic or self-taught, and you can learn many things. And I have a couple of books here that I thought to myself, every one of you could write your own book of that style. And so one thing that's very noble is to be careful what we say. And as I said before, nobleness in speech, nobleness in manners, and nobleness in conduct, nobleness in preferences and tastes, all very important. And remember also, it's important to have nobility in your composure. Remember, who was it? It was the brother of Mrs. Bennet when she was all aflutter, waving her fan and crying about Lydia leaving, and he said, "Sister, compose yourself." So, I think that that is one good thing that we can practice, because life at home is often attacked, and people will do things to make you unsuccessful. People can be very jealous of you if you have nice children, you have a good family, you have marriage, you have some stability, and maybe you live in a nice location, and they can be they want to make you miserable because they're miserable. So you have to be very careful to have good composure. So let's talk about making sure that you give the home dignity by your manners and by your composure. You'll have days when you won't feel adequate at all, but at least you'll look nice. If you'll do what I say and get dressed. Life will seem rather bleak sometimes. And even husbands will go off the deep end. You don't know what happened to them, and they will say something that might even devastate you, that you know they don't believe in, and they'll just like out of nowhere say something that isn't quite right, you know. And so you have to learn to take it all in stride. And so if you're homeschooling especially, and you feel like you're not getting anywhere, sometimes you can get discouraged. But realize that if all you do is teach manners and dignity and nobility in their conduct, in their appearance, in their conversation, in their interests, then you will have helped create a beautiful human being. So I'm going to be reading out of a few books here in just a minute. It's important, I think, ladies, that we are careful that we do not add more stress to our lives. Now, at a point when your kitchen is not how you want it to be and you're behind in a lot of things, it's not time to take on a project and start soap making or something. Those little things can be rewards for when you finish it. If it's near a special day when your family's going to be there and you're going to have to be providing accommodation or food, that's not the time to start a big cleaning project. As long as everything is decluttered, you'll be better off. So don't add more stress to yourself. Now, speaking of that, if you're a homemaker, there will be people who will prey on you because they think that you have time. And maybe they have a project they haven't been able to finish, so they will, or haven't been able to comply with, and they may have volunteered for something. And I remember one time somebody asked me if I would go and do the street behind me. I was out in the country, and they wanted to know if I'd do the road there. There were about 5 houses down there with farms, and if I would go and collect money for a certain charity, because I drove by those houses, and I was very young and very naive. I had my children in the back seat of the car, and I stopped at those houses and went and asked for donations, and I think I collected $6. And one man spent an enormous amount of drama and time writing a check for $2. So when I gave this man at church all of $6, he was astonished because he thought I was going to do better than that. But here it is. You can get trapped into agreeing to things. And remember to keep your little schedule book and say, that's not on my agenda today. And let's see, if I could find time between cleaning the toilet and digging in the garden and all this, or if you could come and dig in my garden and get all the weeds out, maybe we could trade jobs. But don't let people pull you into things, okay? And also they can pull you into selling things, and that's another thing I wanted to talk about, is the enormous waste of your talent and your motherhood and your womanhood trying to earn money. If you are married and you have a family and your husband has a job, then you have a job already. And if you spend too much time trying to earn money, even online, it seems so easy, doesn't it? You're still home. And if you spend too much time, then when someone wants something, you will find yourself taking shortcuts or saying, well, in a minute, I can't get to it right now. Or you're going to try to be getting people out of your way, or to be quiet, or let you concentrate. It's better just to concentrate on your responsibility ahead of you at home. There are many interesting things you can do that aren't going to put pressure on you. There you have your hobbies. I have sewing. I love fabric. There are so many interesting things that you can do that give you peace and rebuild you and edify you and help you to have and also can support you financially in a way because you have less money going out. And sometimes these businesses always cost us a little something at first. So be careful about that. I'm just warning you not to feel guilty because you're not, quote, making a great deal of money. And make sure that your home is looked after first, because a lot of people do neglect their homes, and then they do a rush cleanup job where they don't enjoy it at all, and then they become exhausted. And they're not standing outside shaking out the wet laundry and pinning it and feeling like they're part of a painting with a landscape, because you just got to get that up there and get back in and get another load, and they're starting to rush. And I think it's really important. I like to look at the old paintings by Edmund B. Layton and others that I have shown you on my blog, just to see how they depicted the ordinary homemaker, often sitting in front of her cottage peeling an apple, or standing in the kitchen making something, or, like I said, hanging out the clothes, gardening, and these beautiful, colorful pictures that artists used to paint of things women did. I even saw one, Daniel Ridgway Knight he and his son were excellent painters, and they had more of a Dutch Pennsylvania atmosphere to their paintings, and they painted women in the 1800s with the old washboards that you would set down in the river, set down in the water, washing clothes, and you could just feel that they were feeling this wonderful air on their skin and listening to the birds sing and the water swishing. And we get in a hurry, then housework and homemaking will seem like something mechanical that you eventually hate. And that brings me to children. When you rush them, when you make them hurry up and pick up something, of course you want them to deal with it efficiently and not dawdle on purpose, but you learn to hate the jobs that you can't do well. You learn to hate the jobs that you have to rush through. Now today I'm going to show you this book which I spoke about in a previous video. And it's called Back to Basics. It is the one I spoke to you about where the first chapters was on how to determine how to buy land and whether you should buy it or not. It has beautiful pictures in it, and I believe it was written in the 1980s, but it harkens back to the old times, and it shows people how to homestead in more modern times. But it talks about things that I never thought of, and I think that even if you're never going to homestead, and you're never going to, and you really aren't going to teach your children to be in any way agrarian, you should read this to them anyway, so they'll know. And so I wanted to, in the first part of it, it says using the lay of land to an advantage. And so they've drawn out this gorgeous little piece of land, and you could practice it in your backyard, I suppose. If you had a backyard. If not, you could practice it some other way, in a miniature way. So it says using the lay of land to advantage. This is the book I was telling you about that told you before you pay out for land, find out if there's a road to your place, so you won't have to tread on somebody else's road or have to pay Find out where the water source is and if you can legally use it. Find out what it's like in the winter, where the cold is coming from. You might have a beautiful place, a beautiful view, and you want to build a house there, and you find out that would be the worst place. Maybe it has a cold wind coming straight into it. Find out. It says walk your property, and there are people that are really expert at this. They can walk your property. And I have a grandson like that. He'll walk the property and he'll tell me what's in the soil by what's growing there. And he will say, "Oh, I see you have wild this and wild that. That means this." And then they also can detect water just by walking around. And I find that's interesting. So, and I don't think contractors and people that build neighborhoods even look at that very much, but we should know it. Because some of this BLM land, which is Bureau of Land Management, in the future, maybe long after I've passed, is going to be opened up to people who want to have their own places and to homesteading again. And that sounds fantastic. But I have been told that I'm delusional many times. One time I was telling someone how I wanted my sons to have apprenticeships. I wanted them to learn how to have a skill by apprenticeships, and they were mocking me and telling my husband I was delusional and trying to convince him to have me evaluated. And years later, each of my sons got under the teaching of skilled people who knew how to build houses and who knew how to do other things. And so I was going to tell you that this BLM land will probably be opened up eventually. So using the lay of the land to advantage. Since prevailing wind blows from the northwest, the house is situated on the southeast side of the hill. Okay, so he's got this all drawn out. So you should go out to a piece of property and lick your finger and hold it up to the wind. So, woodlot of 10 acres can provide 5 cords of firewood in a year on an ongoing basis, and they have a little arrow to it. Hilltop is potential site for wind power plant. Windbreak of evergreens shelters house from the north wind. Vegetable garden is planted near the kitchen. They have a little drawing of it all. And in my book, Just Breathing the Air, if you want that book, just write to me on my email, and I'll tell you how you can get it. Don't go to the printer to get it, because they have raised the price up so high that if I get it at my price, that's what I pay for it. You get it much lower. Vegetable garden is planted near the kitchen, and there's a spring, which they point to. See, I've had people walk around the manse outside and tell me where there's a spring. They know this. They sense it. So this is an idealized acre which illustrates how natural features of land can be best put to use. Land use principles apply to small parcels. Contour lines represent points of equal elevation, and pond and earthen dam are located low on the property. A garage, including a shop with tool storage and a driveway. And I believe that this book might even tell you how to survey. And it might be fun just to do it on a small scale somewhere, anywhere that you want at your own place. And don't feel pressured by something like this. It tells you how people, can make their own braided rugs, how they can make themselves a little winter shelter to grow things if you want to. You don't have to feel pressured or pushed. It tells you how to make things, herbal medicines and things that help, and different types of recreation. It's just good to have for your library. It's called Back to Basics, a Reader's Digest, and I have got one for each of my children because I just think it's just nice to have. Okay, so now I'm going to go on to a reading book called McGuffey's Second Eclectic Reader, and this is of the Christian School Edition. So if you are interested in McGuffey's readers for yourself, now some of you aren't interested in homeschooling and you're not homeschooling, but all of life is learning at home, or learning. If you learn anything at home, you've learned, you've homeschooled. And so I think that to make it nice, if you, let's say you have one child and you want to homeschool him or her, why don't you get yourself a book and a workbook and school along with him? And the two of you can have such a wonderful bonding. And I was going to read a couple of things here, in here, and of course I didn't put a bookmark in it, so I don't know where it is. It's a story of, it's about children, and it also even has, it's more agrarian, like it has a little story about sheep shearing, and it's the old woodcut pictures, lithographs, or whatever they're called. And it's mostly about rural things. Okay, so this is called The Fireside. Now, the Christian School edition will be probably much nicer stories that I've noticed about with both editions. There's such a big difference. This just has so much more wholesome things in it. One winter night, Mrs. Lord and her two little girls sat by a bright fire in their pleasant home. The girls were sewing, and their mother was busy at her knitting. At last Katy finished her work, and looking up, said, "Mother, I think the fire is brighter than usual. How I love to hear it crackle." "And I was about to say," cried Mary, "that it is a better light than we had last night." Now, what I like about these books is they will put numbers on each of the sentences. And that way, and that's how I'm able to turn them into plays. When my descendants come, we'll turn one of these stories into a play, pass the book around, and they'll know that theirs is the next number. That their part is the next number. "My dears," said their mother, "it must be that you feel happier than usual tonight. Perhaps that is the reason why you think the fire is better and the light brighter." "But, Mother," said Mary, "I do not see why we are happier now than we were then, for last night Cousin Jane was here, and we played Puss in the Corner and Blind Man until we were all tired." I know why," said Katy. "It's because we have all been doing something useful tonight. We feel happy because we have been busy." "You are right, my dear," said their mother. "I'm glad you have both learned, and there may be something more pleasant than play, and at the same time something more instructive." And so there's a picture of the mother with her two daughters, and they're each doing something, and they're all sitting around together by the fireside. And there was another story in one of these where someone, it was written as though a young man or a boy had written it, and it was Papa is sitting by the fire reading his book. Mother is sewing a button on. Sister is playing with a toy on the floor, and the just this description. And so these little things, they're non-stressful. I mean, maybe you could read one too. And so now I'm going to launch into manners, because that gives you dignity and composure. And I did want to focus on the boys, but I just wanted to tell you that for really young boys, there is the Do's and Don'ts of Yesterday by Eric Sloane. If you can get the Dover edition, it's much nicer, but any edition will do. And this is called Manners in Dress. And I believe it's probably for everyone, not just boys. And it's called In Dress. And do you know, if your family is well dressed in the daytime in your home, everybody smells nice, and it just makes homemaking so much more dignified. It makes homemaking purposeful and worthwhile. But if you let everyone just go wild, it's not. Home is a place. Remember what Osborne said in Wives and Daughters. He said, "Home has become a place where where it's been a source of stress to me or something like that. You don't want home to be a place of source of stress, and that's why the tidiness and the organization, if you can get it orderly, you find immediately your mind clears and you feel so much better. Here's one that I hadn't. I tell you, our manners have slipped so bad. When you start reading this, we used to do this, but somehow just, It says here, don't carry a spoon in your tea or coffee cup. I can understand that now, because it will knock off and other things. It's kind of irritating. The other one is don't read books or letters at the table if others are seated with you, because in a way you're communicating with someone privately while you're in a social group. Don't read newspapers or books or letters at the table if others are seated with. We used to, say put your book away, and we also made people remove their hats. The boys they would wear these little baseball caps, with a little bill on the front, and we'd say, please take your hat off when you sit at the table. And people have just forgotten that because eating has become instead of a place, instead of dining, people are just eating, so they have different manners now. But it says, so we don't wear your hat when you're eating. Don't be, except for ladies, if they're wearing a hat that goes with their outfit and they're at a tea room or something, that's okay. And it says here, don't rise from the table until the meal is finished. Now, that was an old thing that you didn't get up until everyone was finished. But now and then you'd have a few slow people that would say, you go ahead and leave. It takes me longer. But now when people are finished, they just get up and they leave. But we used to have to say, may I please be excused? Many rules of the table seem arbitrary to some persons, but they are the result of the experience of society. The object is to prevent anything that's disagreeable and to establish the best method of doing something. Okay, so manners in dress. Since we've been talking about getting ready for your day, I am now in the process. We are having an extended summer, which makes me feel really good because things have died down as far as activity here at the manse. I have a few people still here, but the responsibility has lagged off a little bit, and so I am looking forward to retrieving what is left of my summer, and I'm going to finish some of the things that I have begun for the summer, and I'm really looking forward to it. So, manners in dress and habits. And this, I believe, was written in I'm trying to think, in the 1950s, was it? And Eric Sloane wrote many things in the 1940s, too. Don't neglect personal cleanliness, which is more neglected than careless observers suppose. Even today, you would think, with all the water, with all the showers available, with all the cleaning products available, people would pay attention to their body odor, to their clothing, to taking regular daily showers and baths. You would think, wouldn't you? And I remember, when your children are little or they're babies, how much they love to take a bath and splash around in the water. What happened to that? They're not interested. And he says, don't wear soiled clothing. Don't be untidy in anything. Neatness is one of the most important of the minor morals. See, that's nobility, isn't it? Rising above the petty. People will say, oh, dressing up, that's petty, or that's petty, but we know that it is noble. Don't neglect details. Keep your fingernails clean. Don't neglect your face and your hair. It says don't wear sloppy clothing, and I just see how we how we go. It says don't go unpolished, and what that means is the overall feeling of being put together. So the do's and don'ts, and it's good for boys. I did find some things for girls. They have a chapter in the end on the back called For Womanhood, which is really good. Now Eric Sloane's the one that wrote about how roads were made and how buildings are made, and he had old time sketches and things like that. So you'll really enjoy the Eric Sloane books for your boys. And so he has a little drawing here: victim of the tyranny of fashion. Don't ever be a victim of the tyranny of fashion. One time in the early 60s, there were you used to be able to go to the store and get patterns for clothing, and most of the time the pattern companies had really decent patterns, but they started to cater to the fashion industry, and they were selling a pattern of these huge bell-bottomed pants where they were just exaggerated. And I decided that was pretty neat, so I bought the fabric and the pattern, and I made these pants that had these big sweeping bottom parts, and I had more trouble with it. I couldn't get in and out of the door without it closing on a part of the fabric. I got it caught on things outside, and it lasted about a day, and I decided that I didn't want to be the victim of a tyranny of fashion anymore. And so this is really old-fashioned. Don't over-trim your gowns or other articles of apparel. And don't submit to fashion. Believe in your own instincts and the looking glass being the mirror, rather than the dicta of the makers of fashion. It says tall women and short women should not be wearing the same style. Don't forget that a bonnet should be so constructed as to cast the features particularly in shade. Don't wear at home faded or soiled clothing. Appear at the breakfast table in some perfectly pure attire, fresh, cool, and delicious, like a fresh plucked flower. Dress for the pleasure and admiration of others. You know, that of course could be taken too far, but I remember in Fascinating Womanhood, she had a section on dress. If you don't like anything that she has to say about marriage, and there, at least go to her sections on homemaking and dress and happiness and stuff. It's a pretty good book. But she said wear a fresh, crisp look, crisp things. And that's one of the reasons why I started to get more interested in cotton prints for clothing. He says here, and so this is just a good little book you can get. And then we have the two that's for older boys and girls, I'd say clear up into their teenage years. Man in Demand, and this is really good, and it tells a story using sketches and cartoons, and it shows how to properly make introductions, how to talk to people when they talk to you, how not to talk too much, and there was even one here on what kind of words you should say, and how not to be vulgar or mean, how to be noble, how to carry something for someone. Even had a picture here of what not to look like, you know, and how to have a good identity, which would prevent you from going along with the crowd, how to overcome self-consciousness. This is really good. You might want to get it and just read it for yourself. And the Christian Charm course for girls, get the one that has the red cover. It's used sometimes, but sometimes they're new. The newer editions I didn't care for too much. This was the one that was printed in the 60s, and it was reprinted up until the 84. And this is really good too, and it talks about things to wear, the difference between looking feminine and looking masculine, and also how to. They had a whole thing in here that you could adapt to your life in the modern times. It's probably pretty dated, but it told the things that you could wear every day, things that you would wear when you were out, things that you would wear to church, and had a kind of a list here. I don't know if this is the one, but they had a whole section here for that on what you could wear for different occasions. So those two books, Wayne and Emily Hunter, you might look those up. And then for the, I've already told you about this one, the real young ones, A Book of Manners for Boys by Emily Barnes and A Book of Manners for Girls by Emily Barnes. Read them first and just pick out what you think would be the most impactful on your child. And just read a little section. You don't have to read too much. Just read a little section. One of them is, what's the difference between how we behave outdoors and how we behave indoors, and just read the little paragraph. That's all you need to do. And when you start reading to your family, they'll want to read it themselves. Now, also we have Diary of an Early American Boy. And I wanted to tell you about that because it's the Eric Sloan, and it's got all these wonderful drawings of a little piece of property and where things are. And I'm not going to be able to read any of that to you today, but I hope that you have got a lot of things done while you're listening. And that I wanted to tell you too about this book, Cottage Core. Don't think that all your homemaking, all your homeschooling has to come from books. We want to eventually get it to where you can figure things out without having to go to something like this. But in the back of this book, Cottage Core, is how to make sourdough bread. And I like it because sourdough bread does not require that you buy yeast. It makes its own yeast with the flour and with the water. And I was listening to a lady saying that her husband had to be away for 4 days or something, and she just wanted something to look after or something to do that would give her some comfort. And so she found out that this took 4 or 5 days, and so every day she would get up to see what there was to do, and it would tell you how much water to put in, how much flour to put in, when to stir it, and then every day she had this to look after. It's actually better than a pet. And so there are books like this that you could actually write, because this just gives seasonal things to do for each season. And this is written by a woman in England that's very, very country-like. And it's interesting, she even had a chapter on how to get out and appreciate the sun. And she starts out with spring and how to reuse your tea bags. Interesting stuff here. So ladies, I hope this has been beneficial to you. If it's too long, you can always pause it, start again another day. And also remember to listen to this on the blog. And thank you for all you do for me and the encouragement that you give me. And I hope you have a lovely day and get a few things done. I still like hearing, what all you did while you were listening, because it also gives other people, when they read the comments on the blog, what am I supposed to do all day, or what am I supposed to do while I listen to this? Then they can look and see, oh, that's a good idea. I always like to listen to things, don't you? And I'm really big into audiobooks right now, and I have a grandson here for a while, and he's into audiobooks, so he sometimes turns them on. We enjoy them so much. So ladies, I'll talk to you later. Stay close to Christ. I love you. Bye.